he's not saying he wants people to shoot the media. I think that's a real stretch. And I'm sure the Harris campaign will turn it into a 35-second TikTok video and blast it. And, that's one of the flaws with Trump. When he goes off script, he allows his opposition to clip it out of context and put it in a video. And he's done that a lot lately.
Now, the big story, of course, that's dominating. There's less than 48 hours now for the presidential hopefuls, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, to make their final pitches to the American public. They are pushing their closing messages, going around several swing states today. Donald Trump's been in Pennsylvania.
You have to do one little thing. I don't want your money. I don't want anything. The only thing I want is get out and vote. We're right there. We had a tremendous number of early votes, a record-setting number, records like nobody can believe.
And every vote really, really does count. The latest New York Times Siena poll puts nearly every swing state within the margin of error. We were talking about this earlier. A new poll of Iowa, where Trump won in 2016, 2020, indicates actually that Kamala Harris may have taken an unexpected lead there. And as I say, big caveats with these polls as ever. Well, here to talk us through the Republican strategy, where it's cut through, where it's not, and what a second Trump presidency would look like, is Greg Swenson, chair of Republicans Overseas. Greg, good morning.
Good morning, Rosie.
Donald Trump, do you think he's sort of stayed on course, on track, on message for these final few moments that he's got before the polls close?
I think he has for the most part. And that's surprising to me because I wasn't sure he could do it. Now, I'm not suggesting he was perfect. He did kind of veer off into, the usual Trumpisms in the last few days. I mean, even just his comment there, like no one's ever seen, about the numbers, but he's right about that. And so that's the funny thing with Trump. He often says things in a clumsy way, but he's often either saying what people are thinking, like, insulting someone, which is not polite, but it's what people are thinking. And then, in the case where he just referenced the early voting, it's absolutely true. The early voting for Republicans is massively different than it was in 2020 and even in the midterms. So I think he's stayed on much more than I would have expected. Again, imperfectly, but the last 4 or 5 weeks of the campaign, he got away from getting into the gutter too much and stayed on message, talking about the policies, criticizing Kamala Harris when it was appropriate. But he surprised me a bit, and I think that's why he's polling so well. He really came back from that, sort of late July and August when Kamala was peaking. So she's kind of, she's gone down in the polls, maybe had a little bit of a comeback in the last few days. I should note that Iowa poll is funny. I mean, it was a surprise, no doubt. And Seltzer, I think her name is, is reputable. But I think it was a small sample of leaning toward older women. And also Emerson came out the same day with an Iowa poll at Trump +9. So I don't really buy the outlier polls right now.
You mentioned, Greg, that sometimes, I think actually often, you didn't say that, I'm saying that, Donald Trump uses clumsy language. I just want to play everyone a glimpse of what happened in Pennsylvania. Donald Trump has stood behind sort of plexiglass while he's speaking to everyone. I don't know the specifics of the actual material, but this is, of course, in response to what has been assassination attempts. And he suggested to a crowd in Pennsylvania that a possible assassin at the event would have to shoot through the fake news, and he didn't mind that so much.
I have a piece of glass over here, and I don't have a piece of glass there. And I have this piece of glass here, but all we have really over here is the fake news, right? And to get me, somebody would have to shoot through the fake news. And I don't mind that so much.
I mean, Greg, the Trump campaign's now sort of trying to say that's got nothing to do with the media being harmed. But, the Republican campaign presumably doesn't want to have to be caught on the back foot the whole time, having to defend comments, which sounds like the potential next president saying he doesn't mind if, someone in the media gets shot.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it did sound, it was hard to follow. I mean, I still can't really figure it out. But look, I think that he uses hyperbole a lot. He uses all kinds of language to describe. He's just trying to highlight the fact that the media is pretty, not just biased against him, but really activist in being against him and for whoever his opponent is, doesn't matter. Whether it was Biden or Harris or anybody else. So, he does it in a goofy way, but I think he has a point again that, he's trying to highlight the media activism in the US right now.
But
And
hang
so,
on. Highlighting
yeah,
the media
sure.
activism doesn't mean that it's okay to say that if someone tried to shoot him, they'd have to shoot through the media
Well,
first to
he's
get to
he's
him.
he's not saying he wants people to shoot the media. I think that's a real stretch, and I'm sure the Harris campaign will turn it into a 35-second TikTok video and blast it. And that's one of the flaws with Trump when he goes off script, he allows his opposition to clip it out of context and put it in a video, and he's done that a lot lately. And the Harris campaign has exploited it, where they can take things out of context, where it's not what he said. Whether it's the bloodbath comment, which he was referring directly to the auto industry and the outcome of the EV mandates from Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. And then they take it out of context and they say that he's saying there's going to be a bloodbath if he doesn't win the election. Not true. Like the Charlottesville hoax, a much longer version was the Russia collusion hoax. If you snip these things out, outside of context, yeah, it sounds pretty bad, and it's unfair. But he should be aware that.
But is he
the
going to
media's
be
not
like
going.
that as president?
Yeah, I mean, even when he was president and everything seemed to work out fine, that people don't miss the sometimes chaotic verbal, exchanges, but they do miss peace and prosperity. So yeah, I think he'll continue to do that because that's his nature. But it's in some way, the unfiltered rhetoric is refreshing. Sometimes it gets him into trouble, but he did that in his first term. And yes, there was some, ups and downs verbally. And yet, we had peace and prosperity, and people miss that. People that don't miss Trump miss the peace and prosperity of his first term.
I wonder how you're feeling, Greg, about, the election results, and then whenever the changeover of power happens in January, a little bit later on next year. Do you have any nervousness about what some allegations might be about sort of the erosion of the democratic process in quite a dangerous way?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, look, we're all a bit nervous. I hope that whichever candidate wins by a comfortable margin, right? I hope that Trump, if he does win, really outperforms the polls, which he did in 16 and 20. So that would make things a little bit more clear that there's no risk that, there's elections denial. I mean, the elections denial really started in full in 2016 and definitely got worse in 2020. But remember the inauguration day in 2017 with Hillary saying that he was an illegitimate president and, he basically, didn't win. And then you had absolute riots on that day, not just in Washington, but all over the country. And so, that sort of kicked off the election denial phase and a lot of destruction and a lot of violence. And then, followed by the, Stacey Abrams in Georgia in 2018, never admitted defeat and then even when she lost in 22 by 7 or 8 points. And then you have, of course, the riots of summer of 2020, which there was actual death and significant destruction, and then topped off by Jan 6th, which, was a disgraceful day, but not nearly as damaging, at least in terms of physical damage and death, especially to law enforcement. Much worse. I mean, the summer riots of 2020 were much worse, but the Democrats have done a good job of keeping Jan 6th on everybody's on the front page and on everybody's memory.
Greg, thank you so much. Greg Swenson.
Good to be here.
Chair of Republicans Overseas UK, giving the perspective from the Republicans. This time tomorrow, we'll be doing the same for the Democrats as the race tightens. Of course, you'll want to be with Times Radio for election night. That kicks off at 10 p.m. tomorrow evening. Callum McDonald will be here. John Pienaar is over in the States. So too is Andrew Neil. I'm going to be going to lots of parties with Republicans and Democrats, watch parties, teams of Americans sort of watching the race, the results play out with them as the night develops. So lots to come here on Times Radio when it comes to your US election coverage. And you'll hear more from what happened in Pennsylvania overnight on Times Radio Breakfast.